Welcome to the Battlefield Show. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by Sammy Boy. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to be back, or I guess for this one, not as much, but yeah, very excited to discuss some important things in this one.
Exactly. And what we're going to be talking about today is the delay of Battlefield 2042 and our thoughts and kind of what we are expecting and what could be going on that front. So let's jump in and get started. Okay, Battlefield 2042, oh boy, has been delayed. If you're not aware, the game has been delayed to November 19th. So it'll actually be coming out after Call of Duty Vanguard, which we'll talk about later on in this episode. But what are your thoughts on what was your reaction, I'll say, to this news?
Well, to be honest, my initial reaction was frustration that I had just finished editing a video on speculation about this. And
of course.
Literally, I just finished it. I was about to upload it, and
feeling good about yourself.
I was like, damn, all right, I'm getting my work done early today. And then looked at my phone and I saw the little Twitter icon and I thought, oh no, please don't. And so that kind of added a bit of pain to it. But no, my initial reaction to it was, I'm not really surprised, to be honest. The sort of radio silence has made it sort of seem like it was a possibility, I guess. So I'm not terribly surprised by it. And as much as it sucks, like I want to play the game today if I can, but I'd rather wait and, make sure that it's a good polished game and stuff. And the fact that it's only a month, not only is that not long to wait, but it also makes it feel like it's not, the game's not a mess. It almost just seems like they're like, all right, there's just a few things that we want to polish up and stuff like that. So, it's not all doom and gloom for me, but obviously it's still disappointing. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It's obviously sucks that we have to wait an extra month, but yeah, it's not the end of the world, really.
Exactly. I'm just going to get this out of the way for all those Battlefield fanboys that have been rating my comments. Not more recently. I think the comment section has actually been pretty good, and it's been good kind of discussion. But like I'd say maybe like half a month ago, maybe to a month ago, when I was making all these videos, like, is it gonna get delayed? Everyone's like, well, just calm down, buddy. We're still a month away from. It's like, yeah. My negativity and my criticism came through. And I was right.
Yeah, the writing was kind of on the wall, wasn't it? Like in hindsight, it's obviously easier to tell, but the fact that there was silence, it was a bit like when I saw the announcement, I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like it wasn't like I was expecting great things and then they did it, and I was like, oh, what the hell? I didn't expect that. So yeah, that probably softened the blow in a way. Their lack of communication somehow almost made it less surprising, weirdly enough. So
the next thing I kind of want to get out of the way is just giving a rundown of our thoughts on delays. I think we're both of the same kind of mindset that delays aren't bad. Like delays are good for games. I would rather it be delayed than it ultimately get launched in a very buggy or broken state. Yeah,
exactly. And I feel like that's what this delay seems like it's for. Like, we obviously don't know. And the other thing I see a lot of people saying is that, yeah, Battlefield 5 was also delayed and that didn't really fix it. But all the stuff we've seen so far, this is something that I've sort of was thinking about yesterday. Everything that we had seen, like, not that we've seen much gameplay, to be honest, but all the trailers and, like, all the marketing, everyone was really, really hyped. No one was talking about, oh, this game looks like a mess, right? So the fact that there's now a 1 month delay, everyone's almost like turned on their head and be like, oh, the game must be broken. But no one would have been saying that without the delay. So
yeah, the only tip off that we maybe saw was kind of with the playtest leaks. And I think that's where this ultimately starts, is that playtest, and just kind of like the weird whole handling of that situation, the massive influx of gameplay that they I don't even know if they wanted to get released. Maybe it was part of their marketing plan. We've questioned this on the podcast before, but it came out. People weren't very impressed with it. Like it did not look groundbreaking. And I think ultimately, like we all content creators were like, yeah, it's a play test. That's the whole thing. But from like because they didn't share any actual gameplay footage to a great extent up until that point, that was all that we saw from the game.
Yeah, that is true. Like that's, yeah, like you said, in one way that is a playtest, but on the other hand, that is partly their fault that that's our impression because they didn't show us that much gameplay. So it's yeah, we don't know what else to judge the game off at this point, really. So I do see why people are a bit sort of worried about the playtest stuff. I didn't really actually think of that because that, you know, wasn't technically like official release from them.
Official.
But yeah, but like that is a good point that, yeah, a lot of people, to be fair, I've seen a lot of people that were really happy about it, but then, yeah, I've also seen a lot of people, which is always going to happen. There's always that mixed opinion and stuff, but
especially current day and age. Like,
yeah.
So for my business, I just got an intern and he's a big Battlefield fan. And we were talking about it just today. It's like, it seems like there's just so much like unnecessary negativity and people are so crabby about things currently. Like it's so you're either so positive about the game that it's negative in terms of like you can't have a good conversation with them, or it's so negative that it's also just like so annoying. Like there's a balance there, and it seems like if you're either going to take one side where everything they do is like been touched by God, and the poop out of these developers is like holy ground, or like you're on the completely opposite side. A developer sneezes and it's like, oh no, this game's gonna be crap and it's gonna fail. It's like, come on, people. Why can't we be excited but also have criticism?
I think it's like a sort of a general thing with the whole world right now, to be honest. Everyone is so, I think it's like a social media, something to do with that, because like no matter what topic you talk about, if it's on the internet, there's just drastic opinions on either side, and they're like the vocal minorities, but they make the most noise, and like that's where the most of the opinions come from. And then there is probably like 90% of people are just in the middle, and they're like us, where it's just like we're really happy about the game. We have criticisms too. We're not like blindly in love with it, but we also aren't gonna just hate on it for no reason. But other than us, because we're content creators, obviously it's a bit different, but like the general people who aren't content creators, they just kind of stay quiet about it, which is fair enough, because that's just what they want to do. They just want to play the game and not really buy into all the noise. So you do end up with that, like sort of like the 5% at each end, which seems like they're like the majority of people, when in reality it's just a small portion of the people, but they're the loudest because they just seek outrage at all times. Like they're just looking for stuff to be annoyed by for some reason. I'm not really sure why.
Exactly. And ultimately, I'd say about 80% of the people that will end up playing this game know absolutely nothing about it because of the terrible marketing. Like they haven't done it. I don't think majority of people will realize the game has been delayed because they haven't really pushed out a bunch of marketing on the game. So I don't think it's a huge loss there.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like somehow a negative is turned into a positive in one aspect there, because there hasn't been that much. I was actually thinking the same thing. Like for us, people who pay attention to the game, we just think that everyone pays attention.
Everyone follows every single developer.
Yeah, but like the general population, like you said, 80 to 90% of people who play games, they walk into the shop, buy it, put it in their console, and never look at anything. They just play the game. So it is going to be weird to like see how that actually, like there's going to be so many people that it'll get to like mid-October and they'll be like, oh, I can't wait to play Battlefield next week, and then no one's told them that it's actually delayed. So
this poor guy.
It's a weird situation.
Yeah, it's the current day and age. I wanna mention this because I've been seeing it on a few comments. It's been like I think it's 5 of the same people leaving these similar comments. at least this specific one, I've been hopping around looking at other people's content and seeing what they're thinking and what kind of the comments are, just getting a little bit of the small percentage that goes through and like actually leaves comments and say what's going on. But I have seen this thing. It's like they've had 3 years to develop this game. 1.5 of those have been during COVID. What were they doing with the other 1.5? Why did they need to delay this? Game development is extremely complicated. Now, I do understand the frustration with, oh, well, I've been working from home this entire time, and our business has actually boomed. What's going on over there? And game development historically has been this super heavy focus on you are in the game studio, you have to be here. There was, even though like it's perfectly suited for work from home, like you don't even need a studio to be a game developer, like perfectly lined up for working from home. But there's this huge culture, and a lot of people they come from either like content creation and then go into game development, or they have like game developments, there's their first position, and they go through and jump from company to company where they don't know how other companies do it. So it's this very kind of echo chamber of game development. Like, this is game development, this is what it looks like.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that I've seen that sort of comment as well, where it's people are just like, oh, this game's they've had 3 years to make it, how is it not ready? That's just an uninformed opinion. You have no idea how game development works, because it takes a long time to make games, man. That's just how it works. And the fact that this is what I think I said this on one of the earlier podcasts. It's almost weird that it hadn't been delayed. I was actually shocked that they revealed the game and it was on target to when they initially said after they cancelled Battlefield 5. Like, it was weird that everything had gone to plan, because every other game out there, look at the games like Halo,
and they were touting like, oh yeah, we're ahead of schedule. It's great.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It was so weird almost, and it felt weird that it hadn't been delayed or something. So
yeah, you said this on the podcast. For 100% sure. Yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So it's like, I think people just expect that like things are just completely normal, and they working from home's no different. Yeah, like you said, our business works from home, blah blah blah. It's all going well. It's completely different with game development, because it's such a collaborative like type of job. You need to be there's different departments that need each other's help all the time, in terms of like they need to know what they're working on, they need to know what stage they're up to so that they can do their own thing. And if you can't just walk 5 meters to the next little office area and check up on the person that you're meant to be working with, instead you've got to schedule a meeting with them and get on Zoom and talk to them and stuff. It's tiny little things like that it might only be an extra 10 minutes, but over the course of 3 years, that's a lot of extra time. And I also saw a really good tweet. I'm not actually sure which developer it was, but it was one of the Battlefield developers. And she tweeted out saying like, making a game from home was much easier than I thought. Releasing a game from home is much harder than I thought. And that makes perfect sense. There's so much of a different, like, it's not all just one process. It's not like you just sit down, do one job for 3 years and then it's done. There's so many different, like, I guess, steps to it. And yeah, exactly. And so this last phase is obviously the most important one. And this is when they always talk about like that crunch time where they've worked steadily for 3 years, and then the last couple of months they have to go really, really hard. And I can imagine that, that's probably also why it hasn't been delayed earlier too, because they can't plan for that stuff. They've sort of moved into this final phase of the game of just like, polishing it and tidying it up. And it would have been great if they had delayed it 2 months ago so we'd known, but that's just not how it works. So I've seen that comment a lot too, where people, it's just like a very uninformed opinion, and people seem to almost think that they know everything. It's like, oh, well, I can do it, so why can't they? But yeah, it's a completely different industry.
It's completely different, and I said this multiple times. Like working from the tech industry to the game industry, even though they're in the same bubble, they could not be more different from each other. Like it's crazy the cultural differences between both of these places, in terms of how they run. But another comment. I want to get these kind of comments out of the way before we go into deeper discussions about what we expect to happen. I think the biggest thing is, here we go, Battlefield 2077. Here we go. This is what's going to happen. What are some of your thoughts around that?
I had a discussion in my Discord just yesterday about this. That the delay doesn't affect the game at all. It doesn't. In fact, it'll only make it better. It's not they're delaying the game. That doesn't mean like, now it's gonna suck. The game was either going to be good or it's going to suck either way. It's only a month difference. And so I don't think it really... I think people are just saying like, everything we'd seen looked good, but they now announced the delay and now it sucks. Like that's kind of the trend that I see, and it doesn't really make sense to me. Last year, The Last of Us Part 2 got delayed in that one game of the year. So it doesn't really... it doesn't really always have to end like Cyberpunk. I think there was so much extra stuff going on with Cyberpunk that it was never gonna. They could have delayed that by another year, and I don't think it still isn't fixed. So they've had an extra year, and it's still broken. So that's kind of my point, is that if the game is going to suck, right? I don't know if it's good or bad because we haven't played it, and I can't really comment on that, but. If it's going to suck, it's going to suck not because of the delay. It's just because, whatever reasons they didn't do a good enough job or COVID interfered or whatever the case may be. But personally, I just don't think the delay really means anything. And if anything, it is a good thing. It just means that they're taking an extra month to polish it. And that's why, we've had this conversation before, that delays are almost, in a weird way, a good thing. You almost when they announce a delay, it's like, okay, now it's going to be better than it was going to be. So I'm not too fussed by it. And I think I can see why people are a little bit worried, because it's obviously, it's something you don't expect really, but I'm not worried about it at all.
It's become like you said, it's become a staple in game development more recently with the shift from work from home. And a month is not much. In terms of a delay, like we've seen Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga, a year,
pain,
over a year delay.
And Halo's had a 12-month delay as well.
Exactly, and that was almost in a worse situation because they were all ready to go. They showed development. They showed basically the game that was ready to launch, and everyone was like, "Wow, what?"
Yeah. That's a perfect comparison. That was at essentially the same the same point in development as Battlefield. We're getting a month delay, they got a year delay. So obviously theirs was completely busted or whatever was wrong with it. I feel like it didn't actually look that bad. It was just the graphics, and they kind of, maybe we can upgrade this a bit. But the fact that it's a 1 month delay, that actually makes me feel a bit sort of safer about it, because it just feels like it kind of feels like everything's done, the core gameplay, all that stuff is done, and then the next month or the extra month is just going to be extra bug fixes and polishing. They talked about the hit markers and stuff weren't exactly how they wanted them, so just little things like that in the grand scheme of things don't really make a world of difference. It's not going to define the game if the hit markers are a bit bigger than we wanted or some whatever, but they do all add up, and it does those little tiny quality of life things. If they can improve that by 20%, because obviously those are small things, so that's a realistic thing to improve it by that much in that amount of time. That's a pretty big improvement on that area of the game in terms of that, the quality and the aesthetic and stuff. So that's kind of, again, I don't know, maybe the game is busted and they've taken a month to fix some really, really big issue. We don't know that, and we won't until it comes out, but it does just feel like they've kind of gone, all right, this is our first one releasing from home. We haven't done this before. Let's make sure that this is how we want it to be. And until I see otherwise, if we see some gameplay and it looks terrible, then that with the delay, I'll be like, okay, this is starting to get worrying. But everything we'd seen, for me personally, looks good. And the announcement of the delay doesn't really change that. If there's other things on top of it, then I'll start to get worried. But the delay doesn't change anything for me.
Yeah, and let's see here. gameplay engineer for Battlefield 2042, Niels Stolinga, said this in terms of the amount of time that they have to work on the game. And they say a lot can be done in 4 weeks when you're in the bug fixing phase of a project. Feature work introduces bugs requiring testing and balancing and possibly more iterations. Bugs can be fixed quite rapidly as they don't usually introduce more work. It's going to be good. We're so close.
That's kind of exactly what I meant too. Like, it just feels like they've kind of all tweeted things like that. They're trying to like reassure us, I think. So yeah, until I see otherwise, I won't start stressing too much.
Yeah, there's multiple parts of that too. Like, I hope ultimately we aren't proven wrong, and that it is in the bug fixing phase. It's historically with DICE, they don't usually delay for bugs and they release patches afterwards. So hopefully this is a good movement in a good direction, because we've seen in the past where they release a DLC and it's wildly broken and it takes them a month to get a fix in. So hopefully this is kind of something where they saw these bugs that were like, oh man, we're known for this. Let's just take the hard decision and move it past and say, okay. And because of this game so big, because of all of these expectations around the game, there's a lot of moving parts. And I think something that we also forget from a consumer, from a hardcore perspective, people really following things, and even like I was talking with someone casually who's just a casual fan of Battlefield, and they were asking, is Battlefield 2042 going to have a campaign? I was like, no. They're like, what? How many developers are working on this? I was like 5. And they're like, what? So there's so many different perspectives. They're doing something completely different. They have more developers than they've ever had in a Battlefield game. Yes, visually this game is smaller, but I think it's good that they're kind of focusing down. So hopefully the things that are issues are, like they said, bug fixes instead of big drastic changes.
Yeah, I agree, and I that's kind of what I was saying too about like if it's gonna suck, it's gonna suck regardless of the delay, because that would be the case anyway. Like if they'd be delaying fundamental it more than issues that with the game, then whether they release it now or in November, that was going to be there. So if it sucks, in November, then it was always going to suck, and that's just something that it's got nothing to do with the delay really. And like I said, if we see stuff that, let's just say we get the beta and the beta is just terrible, then that with the delay, then I'll be like, okay, this is starting to be pretty worrying. But yeah, just alone, it hasn't really changed much for me, because yeah, it just feels like that tweet. It's just like we're in that final phase and we can actually do quite a bit, because we're not introducing we don't have to make new maps, we don't have to make new stuff. It's just fixing what we already have. So
exactly,
that type of work tends to, just from the documentaries and stuff that I've seen of game development and the people I've talked to, that type of stuff seems to be a lot quicker, because you're not creating things, you're just like able to go into the code and figure out where the issue is and then sort of shuffle things around to fix it, rather than we've got a month to make a whole new map, for example. So yeah,
exactly.
It's interesting.
I like how you put it. If it's going to suck, it's going to suck, because you can't, the reason Halo got delayed for a year is because they had drastic changes needed, or they felt, because there's one thing of fixing small things that are already introduced into the game, but changing every single character model and going in and changing the gameplay completely is a much longer process. If it, like, I love that phrase. If it's gonna suck, it's gonna suck. Whether or not it releases in October or November, and we're gonna see that as it starts getting closer.
Yeah. And I think, like, let's just say they came out yesterday and said, look, we're doing what Halo did and we're delaying it until, October 2022, then I'd be like, okay, there's something fundamentally wrong with the game. They need a whole extra year to fix the core gameplay or like whatever the case may be, if they did it that big of a delay, then I'd be worried, because that's when you start thinking the sort of doubt creeps in that, okay, they have had 3 years to make this, even though we were just saying it's a long process, but the game should be roughly done by now. And if they need to fundamentally change it, then that would be a bit of a worry. But they're not going to drastically change anything in the next month, and they know that, so they wouldn't push it by a month and then try to fix some drastic issues with the game. So I think if there was genuine issues with the game, they would have pushed it more than a month. I think the fact that it's been pushed a month is really good news, because it just means that, it's just those smaller little things like maybe just little animations and the hit markers and fixing some bugs, and that's all stuff that can be done fairly quickly from what I've heard anyway.
Yep. You want to hear my tinfoil hat theory?
Go ahead. I'm very keen to hear this.
So my tinfoil hat theory is we saw the playtest and everyone, and it was that was basically final, and they were in. It was shown it was in the final stages of development, and everything's pretty much lined up. It was an older build, but everything visually is kind of there, except it's not with the high res models, and it's not on the newest build. And then everyone saw the UI changes and all of the systems versus the actual gameplay itself. We're like, okay, we don't really like that, DICE. And they're like, what? Wait, what? We've already sent off our copies. We have to bring those all back now? And that's why it was delayed, because they have to implement it into the final. I don't know if they officially call it the gold releases in terms of in DICE development. In other games, though, it's the gold release that they send off to get printed onto the game discs. But that's at least my theory.
I think you're like definitely on the right track though. Like the fact that there is a lot of those smaller concerns. Like the only negativity I've seen around the game is like, oh, I don't like the kill feed, and like when you get a kill, I don't like the UI and stuff like that. Yeah, I could have made that by the looks of it, to be honest. It's like just plain text. Like it looks pretty basic for a game of this scale. So I was not happy with that. But that's kind of what I mean. Those smaller things that at the end of the day, if it was that when it launches, I don't really care. It's not the end of the world, because it doesn't change the gameplay. And because they're such small things to fix, I feel like that's the type of stuff where they've gone, okay, like
it just got overlooked.
This isn't as polished. It doesn't look as AAA as we want it to, and this is a big game for us. So let's get that right and push it back a month. So until we hear otherwise, like that's just my I guess my thoughts on it. I don't know anymore. I don't, there's no inside news that I know. That's just my guess, is that it's probably those smaller things. And if they come out and they talk about something actually being broken, or if, like I said, the beta drops and the gameplay just sucks or whatever, then those, like the additional worries will start to worry me. But it's not as big of a deal as people were making it, because I've seen so much like genuine like complaining and like, oh, the people are just writing the game off already. They're like, oh, this game's gonna suck, and it's like, a month ago, you were talking about how awesome it looked because of everything else we've seen. All the trailers and stuff have all been great. And one little announcement, one little picture that they uploaded to Twitter seems to have changed that for so many people, which is, it's odd.
Yeah. Another thing, as I was kind of laying out my conspiracy theory, another thing that could have been it is the implementation of crossplay. Like it literally just came to me. Because they had the issues in the playtest with PlayStation's crossplay. Like that could honestly be something that they just could not get lined up or fixed, and it was a DICE and a Sony problem that they like literally could not get implemented until a month from now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't actually, because they pretty much confirmed that crossplay was like added after they revealed it. They hadn't really had any plans for it, and then they obviously went like, okay, or they might have already had plans, but it might have been for after launch or something. And then they saw the sort of, everyone sort of whinging about it, and then they went, okay, we need to do this now. So that could be it. That literally could just be, it'll take them an extra month to to do that. So maybe they brought that back to June or July, whenever they started doing that, and then that's kind of pushed everything slowly back. So that's a really good point. It could just be that thing that we know that they've changed that since they revealed the game, and obviously that would take a lot of work. So it's obviously just could be like a little ripple effect, I guess. Pardon the pun for the the company working on it, but it could be part of that too. Is just they brought that in, which wasn't a part of their initial plan, and that's just slowly pushed everything back a little bit. So I'm very keen to hear more. I do want to, as much as I'm not worried, I do want them to like communicate a bit better, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Just
tell us what's going on. Like, even if it's like, hey guys, this is one of the reasons that we decided to push it back. We just really feel like these mechanisms, or this little section, we took in your feedback, and then the community is all happy, like, oh hey, look, we contributed to something, like we're actually a part of something bigger, and then everyone's happy. But instead they're like, we are DICE, and we are in the tall towers of DICE, and we know exactly what's happening, and this is the decision we've come to make after consulting the stars. It's like, come on, dude, this is game development.
I've always not understood why, and like, it's not even just DICE. Like, they are notoriously pretty bad at their communication, but there's so many others out there too, and it's like this whole thing with gaming. I'm not really sure. Like, we show behind the scenes stuff, and it doesn't have to be post launch in a little documentary like say Fallen Order did. You can show that stuff before launch. You don't have to show any spoiler stuff. Like, it's not going to spoil the game for people if you show little grey box tests and be like, okay, like, one thing we're working on this week is we want to, we talked about the hit markers. This week we're going to really try and fix the hit markers and the UI and stuff. You don't have to go into great depth about it. We don't. Yeah. Most of us wouldn't understand what the hell you're talking about because we don't work in that industry. But just
it's a start to
hold our hands educate. A bit and walk us through a little bit what you're doing, so that we stop having that doubt creep into our mind. Because, like I said, I'm not worried. But if it's silent again until whenever, then the more that it's silent, I'll start to go, oh, okay, like I'm nervous again because last time it was silent, it got delayed. So are they going to delay it again? Even though it's all made up in my own head, that doesn't mean it's real. But it's like, that's the things that you start worrying about, and then it just brings negativity that doesn't need to be there.
Exactly. And then you got Apex on the side that they're like, oh, hey guys, this one thing? Well, it's got a bug and we're trying to work on it right now. Give us some time and it'll be ready in a couple weeks. And it was like, great, that sounds awesome. Like, I don't know how many times that I see, it's daily that I see updates like that from Respawn and Apex. It's like, that's kind of like, even if it's not daily, like every other day, once a week, twice a week, something.
And it also doesn't need to be like, I think a reason that they're often scared to do that is because, for this exact reason, they don't want to give a deadline and then it doesn't hit that, because then people start getting mad. You don't have to give us a deadline. I don't care when it's going to happen. If you're just talking about, like, let's just say the game's out and, I don't know, one of the guns is really, really good. I don't need to know the exact minute that the upload, the patch is happening. I just want to know that you're working on it. And I don't care if you just say, we'll monitor it and we'll keep you updated. I don't care. Just acknowledge it. That's my only thing. And it's such a small thing. Like, I think they're very close to being good with the communication, because I think like most of the marketing, until it kind of went silent, but all the other stuff has been decent. And if they just tweet from the main account once a week with a bit of info, it doesn't need to be much. That will then take it from pretty communication to like genuinely, I'll be like, okay, they're communicating really well now. It's just such a small amount that they have to change. They don't need to tweet 10 times a day for me to be happy. They can just tweet once a week.
Yeah, we're asking for the bare minimum. We're not even asking for the moon.
Yeah.
Also, that meme they shared, man, that aged poorly.
Yep. I haven't actually seen anyone like repost that and meme it itself, but that is hilarious. I hadn't thought about that until you said it. I might post that right after we finish recording.
I've been scared to post it because I don't want all the fanboys attacking me.
Yeah, true.
They're just trying their best at communication, okay? Okay, fine. But yeah, for the last thing to finish off this episode, and this may be a lengthy topic, we've talked about the correlation between Call of Duty and Battlefield. Last episode, we kind of talked about the looks of the two from what we've seen, and we got more information around Call of Duty. Open beta is coming up this weekend, and the closed beta currently is rocking and rolling right now. I have been refreshed on my expectations around that game. I've really appreciated kind of a little more details, and I think after the alpha, the beta has definitely showed a lot more positive showings of that game for me personally.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same. I think I played a little bit of the alpha, and it was the game mode itself. They introduced it was called like Champion Hill or something, and I really did not like the game mode. So I think it kind of like affected my thoughts on the game. I actually thought the gameplay was decent enough, but because I didn't like the mode, I played it for like one quick little session, and then I didn't play it after that because I was like, I don't really like playing that mode. So I think the fact that I've only watched a little bit of the beta gameplay, but the fact that there's like other modes and stuff in there now, I think that's probably a big part of it. And yeah, I think the gameplay looks similar to Modern Warfare, which I thought the Modern Warfare gameplay was really good. I think, or the gunplay, I should say, the gameplay in general has got issues because like the time to kill was way too quick, and it was really like campy. The way they designed that game was really campy. So I'm very skeptical about Vanguard just because the last World War II game made by Sledgehammer was I think it was the worst Call of Duty I've ever played.
It was the worst one.
Yeah. And so I'm just like, and I'm a pretty positive person. I generally don't like hold a grudge, I guess you would say, and go like, oh, their last game sucked, so I'm not going to play it. Because if that was the case, I probably wouldn't be playing 2042 because Battlefield 5 wasn't the best game. So I generally don't do that, but just because it was a little bit rough, I'm very sort of skeptical. But yeah, it looks fine. It looks like Call of Duty, I guess. That's really all you can expect. They don't like push the envelope anymore. They just kind of do the same thing every year, and it is what it is. It doesn't make it a worse game because that's what we've come to know and love. So
exactly,
it just looks like Call of Duty to me, pretty much.
Yeah, it's like it's the drink that you drank in college, but you'll go back to after like 20 years later, and you still, even though you know it's kind of subpar, but you're like, it's got good memories, man.
Brings back the memories, man. Yeah,
it's all right. It's not great, but I like it.
Yeah, it really is like an acquired taste, isn't it? You play it. It's Call of Duty is that type of game that when you're younger you play it because it's so like simple. And then as you grow up, like that was the same for me. I realized like, okay, Battlefield is just a better game. Like it's just so much bigger and stuff. But I still like to just jump on Call of Duty every now and then because it's so much. It's so, you know, I've had so many hours playing it. So it's really
like a very sweaty, toxic hug, you know?
Yeah.
But now, like kind of setting the stage of our expectations around Call of Duty. We've got an interesting situation on the battlefield, specifically in terms of about 2 weeks after Vanguard's release, we have Battlefield's release. What do you think that's going to do for the game? Because we had a whole podcast talking about how it's perfectly lined up. I think a lot of Call of Duty players are going to go to Battlefield and give it a try because of the release date. But I think a lot of that doesn't ring as true now. Yeah,
I'm kind of like similar to that conversation that we had where I was, I guess, like on the fence because I was saying, you know, it's probably good that it comes out first because people will play it first. There's also the other side of that Call of Duty comes out, people play that, and then, a new shiny thing in Battlefield, and that maybe steals the thunder. So I think it can work both ways. It just
I don't think 2 weeks is that number though.
Yeah, probably not, but it's also the fact that Call of Duty, it's not like Halo, for example, that people will play forever. It's Call of Duty.
True.
I honestly could play it for 2 weeks and be bored of it because it's just the same thing every time. So I think the fact that it's similar enough to all the other games, and then Battlefield is a sort of big new shiny thing, even though Battlefield's going to be somewhat similar as well to previous games, but I think it still can work in their favour in a way. I also think that if the launch is shaky, it being after Vanguard is probably good, because if it launched really bad before that, and then Vanguard comes out while Battlefield's kind of in a bit of a hole, then that would probably be bad for Battlefield. So the fact that I think it maybe takes a little bit of pressure off the release.
Okay, yeah, I can
just
see
a
that.
bit, but I don't think it's not. I don't think the change is too drastic either way. Really, I think it kind of just has pros and cons really, and I don't think it will like affect sales that much or anything. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. It could be a big change. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have kind of a completely different but kind of a precedent set with Titanfall 2 and Battlefield 1 when they released. Like, they all released very similar around the same time. What was it, a week in between Titanfall and Battlefield 1, I believe. And then as well within another week was the Call of Duty game too. So like,
yeah,
not on the same scale necessarily, but we do have kind of that precedent of these massive shooters with these massive fan bases all coming up against each other and ultimately stealing players from each other. And like, honestly, growing up, I only bought one, like, it was a game, like, I bought like one single player game and I bought one multiplayer game a year. Like that was like it.
Yeah. I think in terms of like the stealing players and stuff, I think honestly that comes a long way after launch. Like I think people who like Call of Duty, they buy that. They're not going to,
they aren't
they're not going to buy
those
Battlefield unless
sure.
they're already interested in that. But like, I think the diehard Call of Duty fans, if Battlefield came out 2 weeks earlier, I don't think that means that, oh, that's first, I'm going to get that instead. I think they're just set. Same with Battlefield, they're just set on that. And even same with Halo, that comes out, a month after Battlefield now. So all of those fan bases are just set already. And there'll be some that don't really have a preference, and they might, the really casual players that it's just like the first one
They'll
that comes out.
play where their
they
friends
buy that.
are or whatever.
Yeah, stuff like that. So I don't think it'll affect it that much at launch. I think the way that the games go after launch is where that will happen, where, Vanguard might be decent, but it might not be super, super addicting because it's just kind of the same thing. For example, it could just be typically like Call of Duty goes. It's like 6 months or less than 6 months after launch, people are kind of bored of it. And so, that's 6 to 12 months after the games are actually out. I feel like how those games have done in the first year, that's when people start sort of moving on. So perfect example is Warzone. Warzone it's been out for so long and it just hasn't changed in the way that people want. So now everyone's going to Apex. I think that's where that sort of the stealing of the fans sort of comes from. So it could affect it a little bit at launch, but yeah, I think in terms of like drastically changing the numbers and stuff, I think that will mostly just come down to how well each game does. And then, if Battlefield comes out really, really strong and Vanguard just isn't all that, then maybe, April, May, that time of year, that's when people will start to sort of jump ship. But yeah, I guess it's the type of thing we just have to wait and see, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think it's very interesting that these. I mean, I've always been of the mindset like, man, these games kind of like they come out really close to each other. It's definitely shooter season. Like there's a time of the year, whether it's October, November, or November, December, it's like these 2 to 3 months are like prime time. All of the shooters come out around that time.
Yeah.
And like I think this is one of the years where Battlefield is really trying to compete really hardcore with Call of Duty.
Yeah.
So that's just where my concern is that this is probably one of the most Call of Duty competitive games that Battlefield has tried to make in a while. They're reaching back into their back catalog. They're bringing these kind of things that Call of Duty has done for a while in terms of bringing back old maps, remastering them in terms of the battle pass and this continued season pass kind of thing. Like they're really reading through the Apex and the Call of Duty playbooks, and they're following through. So I just think it's interesting that they've delayed the game up to the point where they come out 2 weeks apart from each other.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good point in that. sort of like back to what we were talking about earlier, that might be even part of why they've delayed it, is that like they know, like they definitely know this is a very, very important game. They know that after Battlefield 5, like this is, I don't want to say
the
do
decider.
or die, but it really is almost do or die. Like this could propel them to be a genuine competitor with Call of Duty, or it could knock them back and it takes another decade to get back to where they were. So they know how important this is, and that might be part of it. Like, okay, we are trying to compete with Call of Duty this year. Like, let's take that extra month and really polish it to where we want it to be. So that's another good point that you made, that, yeah, like we really haven't seen a Battlefield game that, because usually they kind of stay in their own lane, like it's its own game, and they just do what they want. Whereas now they're still doing what they want, but it's like, but we're adding a battle pass, and we're going to have the free to play has its own type of stuff. Like, it does feel like they're definitely entering the boxing ring, I guess you would say, to try and knock off Call of Duty. So yeah, it is interesting. It's been an interesting couple of months, man, because like Battlefield came out so strong with the release, and then it's almost kind of swung that, because people knew there was like a lot of leaks, and essentially like confirmed leaks that Call of Duty was going to be World War II. So people were not happy with that just because of the actual Call of Duty World War II being the last one. And in the last like 6 weeks, it's like swung around because, Call of Duty has been communicating really well. They've already had an alpha and a beta before we've even had, well, I guess technically we've had an alpha, but it's it's really weird that it's like swung. And I guess that's just the power of Call of Duty, that they just, even though their game isn't groundbreaking, they just don't miss. Every year it just does really well.
Exactly what they're doing.
They've nailed it. They know what they're doing. They know how to, like, it almost feels like they didn't even have to try and compete with Battlefield, and they're kind of back winning, at least right now.
So I went back through the history. It's hard to find sales numbers around video games, because it's one of those things that like, it's like podcasts are one of those things too, where people hold their download numbers to their chest, and it's like, it's super weird, but okay, fine, whatever. What do you, buddy? Okay, because I'm very vocal about download numbers and all that kind of stuff, because like came from YouTube and then went to podcasts. Like YouTube, everything's completely transparent. But I went back through, and Xbox shares some of their numbers, and Infinite Warfare was in the top 10 best-selling Call of Duty games, even though it was one of the most controversial game launches, and like one of the worst in the series. Not the worst in the series, but one of the worst in the series.
Yeah, definitely.
And I went to look at numbers on Battlefield 1, which I would say it's my personal favorite of the Battlefield franchise, and I think it's one of the better showings of the Battlefield franchise, especially in terms of sales numbers. Like, they did really well. Infinite Warfare versus Battlefield 1. I understand these are two very different games, and understand these are two very different timelines in terms of when they came out. Okay, all of those kind of monikers aside, Battlefield 1 on Xbox specifically was in like, I think 5.73 million, and then Call of Duty Infinite Warfare specifically on Xbox, and not a whole lot of people played it on Xbox because they had all the PlayStation partnerships, but they had about 4.5 million. So like about 1 million sales difference between these two games, and it's like, you can't compete with Call of Duty. Even their crappy games are incredibly successful.
That game is the perfect comparison, because I remember so specifically. I remember this like it was yesterday. The I don't know which one came out first, but those two trailers came out it might have been in the same week, or it was pretty close to each other. Obviously, the Battlefield 1 trailer is probably universally the most loved Battlefield trailer. Like, everyone loves that, regardless if you like the game. It was such a well-made trailer. And then the Infinite Warfare trailer was literally the biggest steaming that I've ever seen. I watched that, and I was a big Call of Duty fan. I still am, but like, I was kind of on the fence in terms of I didn't really have a preference. I kind of liked both equally.
Yeah.
And I watched that and I was like, this is the worst trailer that I have ever seen. I thought it was so bad. It was at the time, it was the most disliked video in the history of YouTube.
Yes.
And it's still, like, overall still outsold Battlefield by quite a bit. So that's kind of the perfect comparison. Like, Battlefield did really well. They did everything they could have. Call of Duty essentially had a big swing and a miss, and it's still outsold Battlefield. So it's crazy. It just shows how popular that series is. And it is going to be very hard. I don't know if they will ever compete properly. Like, I think they're like, you can call them competitors at the moment, but really they're not. In terms of sales, they're not.
Yeah, it's big league versus little league.
I don't know if they ever will be. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was very curious one day because I see all these people like, oh man, Call of Duty sucks. It's blah blah blah. It's like, but like, sales number, people are still buying it.
Yeah.
It can't be that bad. It's just yeah. It's wild for sure. And I said this in a video recently. This is one of, if not the most memorable Battlefield games to date in terms of and it hasn't even come out yet.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think this is, maybe it's different because I'm covering it in terms of content, but it's this like battle between them is definitely the most that I've ever really seen it. Other than probably, the Infinite Warfare and Battlefield 1 time, just because that was so memorable, because it seemed like Battlefield kind of won that. But yeah, this is definitely a very memorable lead up to both games, I think. And I know that in 10 years I'll be able to remember all this, because it's been pretty wild, man.
Yep. Grandchildren will be had and be like, oh,
Yeah.
I remember when Battlefield 2042 version 2 is coming out in 20 years. I remember when the first Battlefield 2042 was coming out.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a wild time for sure. But I think with that we've covered a lot of what's been going on in the Battlefield community. Stay tuned for all the content that we'll be producing on the podcast, on Sammy's channel, my channel. Definitely stay tuned for that. If you did enjoy this podcast, definitely do consider subscribing and following the show on your favorite podcast app. You can find the show on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify. Wherever you find podcasts, you can find this show. We'd appreciate it if you do leave a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. Helps us out a bunch and gives us your feedback. And finally, we'd like to thank Ethan Clark for the awesome thumbnail. And we'll see you all on the battlefield.